There's this great story in Luke 5 where Simon, who's later called Peter, is fishing with his two friends, James and John. And they've had a bad day and they haven't caught anything. And then Jesus comes along, and they knew Jesus, I would guess. They'd probably seen him teach. They probably had interacted with him some. They probably had at least seen his impact in other people's life. They understood that he was connected to God, and they understood the love that came through him, and they understood that, right? And so when he said, hey, what I want you to do is I want you to put your nets on the other side, they didn't think it was going to work, but because he said that, they said, we'll do that. And they did that. They put the nets to the other side, and their nets were filled with fish. It almost sunk the boat. And in this interaction, they came to Jesus, they understood who he was, and they ended up leaving their entire career, their entire identity changed, and they became followers of Jesus Christ. I mean, what an amazing thing to be asked Jesus asked them to follow them, and they did. Can you imagine being asked by Jesus? And then you realize later that Peter was the first disciple, at least the first of the 3 disciples that were asked, of the 12. And he was asking them into a pretty big deal, that they were going to be the apostles. They were going to be the ones that he poured into for 3 years, 24/7 internship. And I thought to myself, what was he looking for in these men? What was he looking for specifically in, let's just say, Peter? And because you can imagine, this is a pretty big thing to ask someone to take this position. So, in other words, what were the qualities he was looking for this in Peter? Because we know, whenever you're moving into something and taking on responsibility, maybe you've been in a spot where you've needed to get a job, and you have to do that dreaded interview process where you begin trying to tell them, now this is what I have, and this is why if you accept me into this company and I join you, you won't regret this. This will be a good thing, right? That's what an interview process is. You're saying, I have what it takes, right? I have a friend of mine who maybe some of you've met. He's been to our church. His name's Yushitala, and he's Ethiopian, and he has dual citizenship, but most of the time he's in Ethiopia, and so he's looking for a secular job, and so he's doing some interviews, but because of the culture differences, he was trying to learn how to interview in the United States for a job. And so they put a camera on him, and he explained it to me. He says, well, they put this camera on me, and they said, okay, and we're going to ask you questions. And so they started asking him questions, and some of the questions were like this. So in this particular situation, would you think this would be something you could do? And he'd say, I don't think so. And they'd say, no. They'd stop. They'd say, you don't say that. And he said, oh, okay. And then they'd say, do you think you're qualified for this? And he'd say, no, I don't think I'm qualified for that. And they said, no, you don't say that. In America, and probably in the world, the way we advance is we hide the bad things, and we don't talk about the things that we're weak in, or the things that the bad things, and we bring the good things out. So your resume is just all the good things. And when you're talking to someone interviewing, you have to just say all the good things and not talk about any of the bad things, because it might cause you not to get the job. And see, isn't that kind of the culture that we have? I mean, we have, even in our court system, of often the way it runs, or if you think of politics, I mean, what millions of dollars they put to get an image of all the good and just keep discounting the bad. And if you have the bad come out too much, then your whole career is ruined and you don't get elected. I mean, we see that in religious organizations, right? Where in even churches in which that if you're honest with the things that are really bad in you, oftentimes you may be not seen as someone they respect, or you might find yourself in places of not even being loved by somebody. And that's kind of the message that we have, and that's how you qualify by doing that. But what we see in this particular story is boy, with God, that's not at all what we see. In Jesus, that's not at all what we see. In fact, in Jesus, we see him when he's around religious leaders who are covering their sin and pretending like they don't have it. He gets very angry, and he says, and because he's saying, don't, you hypocrites, and they're hard. He says, you're hardening yourself to God, because see, in the kingdom of God, it's just the opposite. See, we don't have to hide our stuff, And so if you think about Peter, what did he do that caused him to come in and join Jesus and experience the love of God and the forgiveness of God and the empowering of God and made him a disciple? What was the secret thing he did? What was his qualification? Well, here's what he did. He went to Jesus and he started realizing how holy he was. And as he saw the goodness and love and holiness of Jesus, he fell on his knees and he said, depart from me, I'm a sinner. He saw the ugliness and the depravity in his heart. And he cried out in that to Jesus, God. And in that, it brought him into the kingdom. The good news is that we get to come to God with the depravity of our hearts completely out there with him, and realizing that, and in that place we see the mercy of God, and he comes in and cleanses us from all our unrighteousness and gives us a new heart and shows us his love. All you have to do is be honest about your sin, and with that, go to God. And that's where we discover who he is. And in that place, we gain a capacity to love beyond our natural limits. The more we can understand and actually grasp that our best righteous acts, if you just think of the very best thing, when it says in Isaiah that they're like filthy rags, worthless, gross, in comparison to God's righteousness. We need to live in a place that we live with our whole being and understanding to greater and greater depths what Christ has forgiven us of. And in that place, we gain the capacity to love in a way that's beyond our own limits.